Just Return, episode 45. Friends, they're about to go home. So this chapter is called In the River, in the Air. Carla encouraged everyone to get some sleep, but said he would feel happier to get the boat moving up the river away from the loggers. Exhausted, all slept but Carla, who kept the boat moving for a couple of hours and then took a turn into a small tributary he knew. He understood that some of the logging operations were from powerful organisations, and he didn't particularly want the criminal elements of the Manus area to be able to connect him or his boat to the destructive attack on the logging camp. He was very pleased to have played his part and proud his friends had helped him, but he wanted to continue his life of freely trading up and down the river. People who would wipe out a village without concern for the people would think nothing of making a small-time river trader disappear into the murky depths below. He was tough, and if he was cornered he would be hard to take, but he was also modest. He knew his limitations. When Belle woke up, all she could hear was the gentle breeze in the vegetation, and the high-pitched singing of a golden blackbird perched in a branch hanging over the back of the boat. She found Gus and her mother already up, and joined them for coffee. It was good to be drinking real coffee again. The trip up the river was now fairly uneventful. They took it slowly, and Carla stopped to buy fruit and some jewellery from one village on the second day. When they came up the river to Manus, Belle and Gus were shocked by the way the world changed into a city with high-rise buildings. True, in some places there was evidence of native people, and also there was evidence of some poverty, but these buildings were tall indeed. As they left the boat, Carla suggested that they all meet up the next day. Hermes agreed that was a good idea. He had the whole story written out roughly, but he just wanted them all to meet up relaxed and happy before the four visitors went home. They decided to meet up in that same bar, yes, the one that had been designed along the lines of Manus Opera House. After a night in the hotel and the beginnings of reacclimatizing to civilization, Gus and Belle were pleased to spend some time with Hermes and Carla. Also, when Yaviro arrived, Gus shook his hand warmly, and Belle expressed how much they appreciated his help. They were delighted when he told them that he had smoothed the way to get them out of the country quickly. The aviation authorities wanted details from them, but that could be dealt with quickly on paper. Yaviro had persuaded the authorities that the important thing was to get them home to England after such a long stay away. It had all been fast-tracked with the British Embassy, and Yaviro had new passports in his hand. Belle looked around the worn-out bar, not busy at this mid-morning hour of the day. The pictures and the decor spoke of a splendid age, but it was gone. The city of Manus tolerated the old, but it certainly didn't plan for it. And this bar would soon be left behind. Long before the 21st century dawned, the Art Deco bar would be gone to make room for a very large block of expensive apartments. Just as the loggers invaded the forest, so the developers were eating into the city. The noise that intruded from outside was more than Belle could live with. She'd hoped Salisbury didn't sound just as bad as this. Her senses had become accustomed to the natural noises of the rainforest. She hadn't minded the chug of Carla's boat that had seemed gentle enough, but here the traffic and the construction noise was overwhelming. Hermes promised that he would only write the story for one Brazilian and one English newspaper. He agreed that Belle should be allowed to write her own story in much more detail in the future. Also, everyone agreed that when he wrote out the account of what the loggers had done to the Indians, he should be able to write as much as he liked and get it published everywhere. The story of the retaliation attack should be published also, but nobody must know that they were involved. Yaviro was angry as Carla when he heard what they'd found at the village. He agreed that they had followed the right course in destroying the loggers' supplies and equipment. He also agreed that the natives of the rainforest needed powerful allies in the world outside if they were to survive. Though Hermes and Christine, Stephen and Belle helped Yaviro understand that back home they would be giving thought to how they could do that. At the hotel, with four aeroplane tickets in their hands, Stephen asked Gus how he felt about flying. "Fine, Stephen. Have any planes crashed since ours did?" "Yes," Stephen said honestly. "Ah, my friend, but only a handful. We will be okay." Early the next morning, as Manus' inhabitants hurried to work, Gus, Yaviro, Hermes, Christine, Stephen and Belle hurried to the departure area of Manus Airport. The Atlanta flight was delayed by 45 minutes. They'd got plenty of time. Carl arrived with something under his arm. He gave Belle a book, Photos of Amazon People. He explained that he'd previously transported the photographer who made the book up the river prior to his first location. They'd stayed in touch and he'd found her a signed copy of the book to take home with her. Belle gave him a hug that surprised him. He nodded as Hermes translated her expression. She promised to return. For Gus, Carla had something else, a set of cufflinks made by Indian craftsmen who worked here in the city. Gus was very pleased with these. The four from England were soon being hurried through customs who knew about them, and they were sitting on the plane, and Belle sat with her mum and Stephen and Gus behind them, and as the plane taxied out to the runway, Christine took her daughter's hand. Belle was thinking about Duncan. As the plane accelerated down the runway and reached for the sky, Belle swallowed with difficulty and was aware of the perspiration all over her body. Christine said, it's okay, Belle. It's okay." Belle nodded and listened carefully to the sound of the jet engines. "As long as they sound the same," she said, "it'll be okay. As long as they sound the same." One of the air hostesses came and asked them if they were all right. It was obvious that the cabin crew knew that the survivors were on board. Soon the aircraft was high above the rainforest, and Belle forced herself to look out of the windows at the snaky river Amazon and the miles of rainforest around it. Her feelings were a strange mix. Anxiety at once more being airborne, sadness that Duncan was lying there somewhere down below, alive no more, bittersweet to leave these wild places, worry about Gus and what decision she would make as regards telling who he was or not. Christine watched her daughter, and she knew that it would take time for Belle to readjust back to life in the south of England again. Also to grieve properly for Duncan. Her and Stephen would have to help her through all this and be there for her. They would need patience and kindness, but at least she had her daughter back. And Christine got to wondering about Gustav. Who would be there for him when he returned to his home? By the end of the second day, as the plane from Atlanta neared Heathrow Airport, London, Belle had a lot less anxiety about flying and a lot more about Gus. As the aircraft descended rapidly and the wheels span and spat on the runway, Belle looked out at the overcast July afternoon and she thanked God for her safe return to England. As they dropped out of the cloud cover, her mother had pointed out Windsor Castle, and she was pondering the brick, cement, tarmac and high-rise world below as she took in the jungle of Greater London. As they came through the arrivals area and through customs, Belle and Gus were led into a room where an official of the Brazilian embassy and a senior customs officer met with them. The very gracious Brazilian told them they didn't want to cause them any problems and delay now, but they would be contacted later for information about the plane crash, and could they help them with the location of the crash. Belle listened, but did not really want to give too much information. Just now she was fearing disruption for the Indians. Gus said little, and he seemed to be sharing her feelings. Contact details were checked, and the customs official welcomed them home, but warned them about the press. The four of them joined up again and proceeded through the departure lounge. Very quickly there was a sea of press people, all talking at once and firing questions. Photographers filled the airport with flashes like a tropical thunderstorm. However, Stephen Saunderson took charge of the situation. He announced in a loud voice that both Miss Devlin and Mr. Meitzer were far too tired to answer any questions. They wished everyone to know that they're glad to be home again, and the full story will be made fully available soon. Outside, the police came to their aid, and the Sun reporter who asked, "How do you think your IRA father would feel about your survival?" was ordered back as Belle and her mother got into the back of the hire car Stephen had arranged for them. It had been agreed that they should all four go to Christine's home and eat there. Arrangements to get Gus home would be made the next day. By the time the car was off the M3 and Stephen was steering homeward along the A303, Belle had fallen asleep on her mother's shoulder, breathing deeply. Soon she was dreaming about her friends in the village, Yukta, Taliki and little Linkler. Gus was sitting next to Stephen in the front of the car, amazed at the volume of the traffic and wondering why all the human race in England had to be in such a dreadful hurry. He thought as he watched Stephen's speedometer needle rise that a trip in a canoe was so much more a better way to travel. He was trying to kill any concerns about the press breaking up stuff about him. Even less, he didn't want to think much about what Belle might do. Life had taught him that if there was nothing that could be done about a matter, there was no point in worrying about it. What could he do? Nothing. He just had to wait. Belle's mother woke her as they began to enter Salisbury, and the familiar sights gave Belle an excitement of magnetic descriptions. Very little had changed, and as they turned the corner into James Street, Belle cried gentle, happy tears. "Well, Belle," said her mother, hugging her close, "it is so good to have you home." So we're near the end of the story, but we've still got this question. What does Belle do? Does she tell about Gussie's past? Well, the question's still there. Let's see what she thinks in the next episode. Bye for now, my friends. Bye-bye.